Good evening. Good evening and welcome. I'm Ben Brunner, professor in the Department of Music, the Helen Diller Family Director of the Center for Jewish Studies, and at the moment also the acting director of the Magnus Collection of Jewish Art and Life. I would like to thank the staff of both the Center and the Magnus for supporting the events we present throughout the year. And so to begin with, I'll quickly note a few of those coming up. February 5th here at the Magnus, David Kurtzer will speak on Christianity and anti-Semitic propaganda in Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. February 11th, also at the Magnus, Joshua Cole in conversation with Steve Zipperstein on anti-Jewish violence and the colonial situation in French Algeria. And then on February 13th, up at the newly unnamed law school, the well-known Deborah Lipstadt will be speaking on anti-Semitism here and now. All of these are events in a year-long series of talks on anti-Semitism that we're co-sponsoring with Hillel, and that my colleague Professor Ethan Katz, who just walked in, has had a direct hand. So it's a rather depressing series, but a really important one. March 5th, for something totally different, March 5th in Dwanell, Ilana Pardes will discuss her new book, Song of Songs, a biography with several prominent members of our faculty, Uri Alter, Hannah Kornfeld, others. For details on these and additional events, check our website, please, jewishstudies.berkeley.edu. We'd like to have you here in the room with us, but if you ever miss a talk or have friends who didn't come and you would like them to see the talk, we post videos on our website. We actually have a YouTube channel that you can get to through our website, so please refer people to that or go visit yourself. Wearing my Magnus hat, I'm excited to tell you that we plan a public event presenting the new Arthur Schick exhibit here on March 12th. So the announcement is not out yet, but that will be coming soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. It's an amazing exhibit that Francesco Spagnola put together, and well worth seeing whenever you can, but an opening where Francesco is talking about it makes it doubly worthwhile. Sorry, one second. I don't want to give Tomer's lecture for him. So tonight is our annual Diller Family Lecture, the most public manifestation of the very generous gifts which the late Helen and Sanford Diller made nearly 20 years ago in support of Jewish and Israel studies at UC Berkeley, their alma mater, where they met in the early 1950s. We are very grateful for their contributions, which have been transformative, supporting students, research, public programming, and the Center for Jewish Studies itself. It is no exaggeration to say that without the support of the Diller family and other donors, some of whom are here with us, Jewish studies at Berkeley would be greatly diminished, and the possibilities for a well-rounded Berkeley education would be poorer. Together with our partners at the Berkeley Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies, we at CJS and the Magnus are engaged in a major fundraising campaign to make the study of all manner of topics related to Jews and Israel a full-fledged, permanent, and dynamic part of UC Berkeley. Wearing two of my three hats, I urge you to help us reach our goals. And if you're interested to learn more, I'd be happy to talk to you after this. So now it's my pleasure to talk about what we came here for. I put a preposition at the end of that sentence, I realized. Tomer Persico. We've been very happy hosting Tomer for the second year as the Koret Visiting Assistant Professor of Jewish and Israel Studies at UC Berkeley. We are delighted that he will be staying here for a third year next year. During this time, he's also serving as the Shalom Hartman Institute Bay Area Scholar in Residence, giving public lectures at synagogues and various other venues in Northern California and elsewhere. Tomer teaches popular classes for us, classes that fill up quickly. He receives very high marks from his students. I hope that he gives them high marks in return, but if they don't deserve it, maybe not. Topics he has been teaching at Berkeley include Introduction to Jewish Mysticism and Contemporary Judaism in Israel. Before arriving in Berkeley, Tomer Persico taught for 8 years at the Department for Comparative Religion at Tel Aviv University, where he earned his doctorate. His fields of study are contemporary spirituality, Jewish renewal, forms of secularization, and trends of both secularization and religiosity in Israel. His book, The Jewish Meditative Tradition, was published by Tel Aviv University Press in 2016. Alongside these academic activities and achievements, Tomer is also a widely read public intellectual. He blogs extensively in Hebrew and English on matters religious and political, writing hundreds of articles for the popular media. I don't know when he finds the time. Tonight he will speak to us about Neo-Hasidism and Neo-Kabbalah, privatized uses of traditional lore. Please join me in welcoming Tomer Persico.
Thank you, Ben. And thank you all for coming here to listen to this lecture. I really want to begin with the first Jewish renewal congregation in California, which was established, of course, here in Berkeley. It was the Aquarian Minyan, which was founded in 1974 after a month-long retreat held by the man in sunglasses. This is Reb Zalman Schachter Shlomi, one of the perhaps the main persona for Jewish renewal in the United States, contributing immensely to the development of Neo-Hasidism and Neo-Kabbalah here. So in 74, Zalman Schachter Shlomi founded the Aquarian Minyan here in Berkeley, and a decade later, he noted something about Neo-Hasidism, which I want to bring before you. He says, I don't yet see a movement in Neo-Hasidism. I see a trend that has components of nostalgia, as well as a search for roots and authenticity, and most of all, a search for vision and awareness for the integration of all parts of our lives. The Besh, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, the best message that came to us via Peretz and Buber promised to us a path straight to the heart of things. Now, I think Schachter Shlomi exhibits a great talent to be both an agent of change and an almost impartial judge of that change. He says very succinct things about Neo-Hasidism. Indeed, nostalgia. Indeed, authenticity. Indeed, vision and awareness. Indeed, taking from the best through Peretz. Peretz, this is Yud Lamed, Yib, Isaac Yib, Leib Peretz, and Martin Buber, of course, and incorporating these material today in an effort for spiritual renewal today. This is exactly what I want to show that Neo-Hasidism manifests, and especially I would like to underline the word authenticity here, because it plays a central part in our story. Now, authenticity, notice, can be sought after in different ways. For one, an authentic deed can be a deed done according to a very ancient tradition. For another, an authentic deed can be something that expresses our innermost self. And that distinction will be a central part of today's offering. So, what is Neo-Hasidism? I would like to present a very simple and general definition. It's the deliberate and conscious attempt to draw inspiration, tools, and cultural capital from early Hasidic texts and practices in order to bring about Jewish contemporary spiritual revival. And Neo-Hasidism has its roots at the early 20th century. It has two main trends or strands that originated really in the first years of the 20th century, in the 20s and the 30s, with two main figures. One is Martin Buber, and the other is the Piasetzner Rebbe, Rabbi Kalman Kalmish Shapira. And I want to present how they envisioned Neo-Hasidism, how they inaugurated it. First, Martin Buber, of course, a very important philosopher, or taken as such, at the beginning of the 20th century, at the middle of the 20th century. But for us, a propagator and a popularizer of Hasidism, really at a time when it was not known at all. And Buber, in his 1908 book, Stories or Tales of the Baal Shem, writes as such. Among the village Jews of Poland and Little Russia, there arose a movement in which myth purified and elevated itself, Hasidism. Mysticism became the possession of the people and at the same time assimilated into itself a whole narrative ardor of the saga. And in the dark, despised East, among simple, unlearned villagers, the throne was prepared for a child of 1,000 years. So this is, of course, some waxing a bit poetic about the origin of Hasidism and a bit of condescension from a West European Jew towards Eastern European Jews, as was the fashion at the time. But for us, it's important that Buber finds in Hasidism something special, and that special thing he wants to bring to the present. Groups of Hasidim still exist in our day, though Hasidism is in a state of decay. But the Hasidic writings have given us their teachings and their legend. The Hasidic teaching is the proclamation of rebirth. No renewal of Judaism is possible that does not bear in itself the elements of Hasidism. And that's what's important for us. Here really is the entire narrative of one strand, at least, of Neo-Hasidic thought. First, Hasidism is a great treasure, located somewhere in the past. Hasidism today, which you can see in ultra-Orthodox Judaism, is in a state of decay. It doesn't matter. It's dry. It's mechanic. It's no longer living. We should tap into whatever was then, take from it in order to offer a Jewish revival, renewal, spiritual awakening today. And Buber here, of course, and in his later writings, will use Hasidism in order to offer an antinomian or anti-halachic, anti-Orthodox Judaism, really, right? He uses the legitimacy of Hasidism, Hasidism's stress on the inner worlds, on feeling, on emotions, on authenticity, on intuition, in order to reject the halakha and claim legitimacy for his antinomian spiritual Judaism. But there's another strand of Neo-Hasidism, and it comes from Clonimus Kalmi Shapira of Piaseczno. This is the Rebbe of Piaseczno, most famous for his sermons in the Warsaw Ghetto. He was unfortunately murdered in 1943 in the Warsaw Ghetto. But before that, he was the Rebbe of Piaseczno, a small town near Krakow, and he brilliantly wrote pieces of spiritual teachings that hold a wonderful spiritual path. We won't go into all that. I just want to show you how he understands Hasidism and what he wants to make of Neo-Hasidism. So for Piaseczno, something else is the matter. Something else is troubling him. And of this our heart will ache and our hair will stand on end when we see the young generation has left the fold, God forbid, and has no faith, no fear of God, and no Torah, hating God and Israel. He is excited and passionate about false beauty of the silly things of the world, like the theater houses and all sorts of frivolous and promiscuous things. This is the 20s in Europe, and of course the Piaseczno is referring to secularism. Right? The young generation is no longer observing the halakha. The young generation is following different trends, I would say, especially socialism, but also theater and promiscuous things. What to do? We have to get into his soul and cheer it and excite it, emphasis in original. We have to educate him in the ways of real Hasidism. From early on, teach the youth according to his way, Proverbs, and the way of our generation's youth is the way of real, hearty, animated Hasidism. So there's real Hasidism. The Piaseczno Rebbe is, of course, a Hasidic Rebbe himself, but he also adopts this narrative of Hasidism today not being real. Buber would say, how did he call it, decayed, right? It's not real, it's not exciting enough. We have to tap into the treasures of old Hasidism and use them to capture the hearts of our young generation that is wandering away. So these are two different strands of Neo-Hasidism beginning at the same time, early 20th century. One, antinomian, anti-halachic, using Hasidism in order to legitimate unorthodox spirituality. And one, using Hasidism, or at least trying to, in order to keep the young generation inside Orthodoxy and Jewish observance. Hasidism at that time was really mainly an idea. It became a popular movement here in the United States in the 60s, and it began that story really at the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s, with two specific people, Reb Zalman Schachter Shlomi, who we mentioned before, and of course, Reb Shlomo Carlebach, which you all know as a master of song and teachings. And they were both, long before they were hippies and opening the House of Love and Prayer in San Francisco in 67, and other things, they were Chabad Hasidim, Lubavitcher Hasids. And the beginning of their journey into Neo-Hasidism began in Chabad. Here's the story, right? Reb Zalman Schachter Shlomi narrates what really happened there. So it was Yud Kislev, and this is Yad Kislev, Yud Tes Kislev, this is a Lubavitcher rabbi. And we were there in Lubavitch, and there was a Farbrengen in the small room. There's a big dining room, and there was a small room, and there was the Rebbe's mother's bedroom. We were all standing outside the door of the Rebbe, standing on the steps singing nigunim, while the Rebbe was having a Farbrengen inside. So Shlomo Carlebach, and I were called in. We made a lechaim. He said lechaim. And then the Rebbe asked us, "Kedai ihr sollt obheinem voran zu colleges." Right? You should start going to colleges. And on the side was a little bottle of schnapps. He told us to take along. He didn't tell us what to do. So Shlomo and I decided on Hanukkah that we were going up to Brandeis Boston University. So I gathered from the shul certain prayer of tefillin, which I refurbished a bit. And then on Hanukkah, Shlomo came to Providence, and I picked him up, and the two of us went to first trip to Brandeis University. Before long, we found a table and set up on the table the brochures, the tape recorder, and this and that, and people hung around. They listened first to the music, and then they started to ask questions. And Shlomo started to tell stories, Hasidic stories, of course. While Shlomo is telling stories, someone says, "That sounds like Indian mysticism." So I pulled the guy aside and said, "Do you read the Upanishads? Have you read the Bhagavad Gita?" And so on. And then I would say, "Oh yeah, ours is better." Okay, this is the end of the 40s, 48, 49. The Rebbe was the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, not the 7th and final Lubavitcher Rebbe. And already we can see that Jews, even in Brandeis University, are interested in Eastern religions. Already they are wandering and taking up spiritual paths which are not Jewish. And the Rebbe, the Chabad Rebbe, understands this and sends Zalman Schachter Shlomi and Shlomo Carlebach to pull them back. And in order to pull them back, they use Neo-Hasidism. They use Hasidic stories, they use Hasidic nigunim, and they will use Hasidic techniques of spiritual progression. This is what they offer in order, as the Piazetzna would say, to capture the hearts of the young generation. And from here, Neo-Hasidism becomes a major popular movement in Jewish renewal, and really until this day is very prominent among Jewish renewal circles. Now, I want to understand with you what differentiates Neo-Hasidism from Hasidism, right? What does Neo-Hasidism do when it takes ancient or really 200-year-old lore from the beginnings of the Hasidic movement and uses it for spiritual awakening today? And in order to find that out, I want to focus on one specific Hasidic group and on one specific Hasidic practice. The group is the Breslav Hasidic community. This is a picture I took in Jerusalem. It's a Breslav sort of van going about, dancing, singing, and trying to missionarize, really. And really, you should know that the Breslav Hasidic community is going at this time through a fantastic burgeoning. It is almost impossible to escape its sphere of influence in Israel. into singing, into songwriting, it's into film and art and poetry. It, of course, organizes the yearly pilgrimage to Uman. Rosh Hashanah in Uman is a very big thing and you know, reported in the news every year in Israel. And it also supplies the Israeli Jewish renewal scene with quite a lot of spiritual teachers, of Breslav spiritual teachers. In particular, one very popular practice in this Breslav Hasidic Jewish renewal is the practice of hitbodedut. Rabbi Nachman, who died in 1810, he was, by the way, the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. Rabbi Nachman told his Hasidic followers that they should take 1 hour out of each day and practice hitbodedut. Now, what is hitbodedut? This is exactly the question I want to try to answer, first by Rabbi Nachman, and secondly by his contemporary popularizers. And through this, we will see the difference between Hasidism and Neo-Hasidism. So for Rabbi Nachman, what is hitbodedut? The primary element of hitbodedut and the talk between him and his maker in wholeness is that he lays before God, blessed be he, his words so thoroughly that he will be very close to abdicating his soul, perish the thought, until he almost dies. Chas v'chalila is perish the thought, right? He almost dies, perish the thought, until his soul is tied to his body only by a thread because of all his real sorrow and longing and craving to God, blessed be he, as it is said, a man's prayer is not heard unless he risks his soul. So for Rabbi Nachman, hitbodedut is crying and craving and weeping and yelling and almost abdicating the soul in longing and yearning for the divine. And in another place he will write, thus you nullify your soul and you become nothing, and so you are only with the divine, and your ego, as we would say, is completely silent and nullified. That's for Rabbi Nachman hitbodedut, a sort of a yearning towards the above. Now I want to show hitbodedut according to one contemporary popularizer of Rabbi Nachman. And this will be Rabbi Erez Moshe Doron, a very popular Breslav rabbi in Israel today, born in 1962. As part of his spiritual quest at the beginning of the 80s, he became chairman of the Israeli Union for Parapsychology, what we call, you know, telekinesis and telepathy and whatnot. Of course, this is before he became a Breslav Hasid. Today, he leads the Lev HaDvarim organization for the propagation of Breslav teaching, self-proclaimed authority for questions regarding hitbodedut, and he has a few books on hitbodedut. What is hitbodedut according to Rabbi Erez Moshe Doron? Well, sorry. One of the most efficient ways that Rabbi Nachman discovered for delving deep is the way of repetition. One should choose a specific Bible verse for the saying of the sages, or even his own combination of words, and repeat it again and again in intense concentration. It seems that comfortably sitting while closing the eyes is very suitable for this method. Choose one of the divine names, sit so that you are comfortable, close your eyes and call him with all the concentration you can muster, with all the honesty you can find, again and again and again, until the husk of the heart is broken and the great light of God shines and floods everything. So this is quite different from what Rabbi Nachman advised, right? It's a different set of instructions, and it's a different direction, really, for these instructions. You do not yearn and cry upwards. You look inwards. You do not speak frankly with the divine. You mantra-like mention a divine name over and over again. And then you do not nullify yourself, but really a great light erupts inside you. Something has changed. And what has changed is, if we called Neo-Hasidism the deliberate and conscious attempt to draw inspiration, tools, and cultural capital from early Hasidic texts and practices in order to bring about Jewish contemporary spiritual revival, what has changed is when these early texts become contemporary spiritual revival, they are internalized and subjectified, right? They are taken inside and they become a part of one's own transformational inner journey. I will now try to show that Neo-Kabbalah is basically going through the same process. First of all, what is Neo-Kabbalah? And here I will use the same general, very simple definition. Neo-Kabbalah is the deliberate, conscious attempt to draw inspiration, tools, and cultural capital from Kabbalistic lore in order to bring about Jewish contemporary spiritual revival. Now, when we talk about Neo-Kabbalah, and you probably know the Kabbalah Center in Los Angeles, and maybe you've heard of Bnei Baruch. I will talk about both movements. These are the major movements, very popular, holding tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of followers around the world. These are the main movements that teach Neo-Kabbalah today around the world. And they both descend from one specific rabbi, from this Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag. Ashlag, who was born in Warsaw in 1885, he crafted a modern interpretation of Lurianic Kabbalah that blends a Hegelian historical comprehension with a Marxist social vision and a few fundamental psychological insights. Basically, for Ashlag, the world will come into fruition and completion and perfection when all people understand the Kabbalistic secrets and become transformed from being egoists to being altruists, from being self-centered to being other-centered. We will become, all of us, totally egoless creatures, and then, of course, we will live in harmony. And basically, Ashlag would critique the capitalist way of economy and maybe way of life because it is egoistical, and adopt a Marxist understanding of economy, only adding that in order for the Marxist vision to work out, Kabbalistic secrets and, of course, the divine have to be integrated into reality. Basically, and as I said, global redemption for Ashlag is collective transcendence of the ego to be brought about by extensive dissemination of his version of Kabbalah. So we need to let everybody know what Kabbalah is. Now, this is the Ashlag extended family, meaning students and main teachers. Direct lines are family, sort of dotted lines are master and student relations. And this line, this dotted line, differentiates between, on the right, halachically today ultra-Orthodox Ashlagian Kabbalists and non-Orthodox, not halachic Neo-Kabbalists. Prominent among them are, Philip Berg, the founder of the Kabbalah Center, and Michael Leitman, the founder of Bnei Baruch, as I said, the two major movements that we are talking about. So let's talk about these people and then see what they do to Kabbalah. Philip Berg, born in 27 to a Jewish Orthodox family. In 65, he founded with Rabbi Brandwein, he was there on the family tree, the National Institute for Research in Kabbalah, which was not very successful. Beginning in the 1990s, the centrality of halakha and the exclusive status of Jews were dropped from the curriculum, and the institute was now named the Kabbalah Center, and of course it flourished, not very surprisingly. Surprisingly, Berg died in 2013, and it's surprising since already in 2000, he wrote a book titled Immortality, the Inevitability of Eternal Life. Apparently, it is not inevitable. Leitman, on the other hand, was born in 1946 in Belarus, then part of the Soviet Union, began his journey into the secrets of Kabbalah in 1970 under the tutelage of the same Philip Berg we just saw, eventually became a student of Yehuda Leib Ashlag's son Baruch Ashlag, becoming his personal assistant in 1979. And after the latter's death in 1991, Leitman founded Bnei Baruch, literally sons of Baruch Ashlag. And today the movement boasts tens of thousands of members around the world. Lightman's books have been translated into more than 30 languages, etc. Both organizations are very successful, and I didn't mention, but of course you know that the Kabbalah Center itself boasts a membership of Madonna and Britney Spears and Demi Moore, etc. Ashton Kutcher. Okay. Now, with Hasidism, I wanted to show the transformation into Neo-Hasidism with testing or examining the role of Hitbodedut and what happens to Hitbodedut. Here I want to do the same by examining what these people, these very people, how they define Kabbalah. Their answer to the question, what is Kabbalah? Right? And through their answers, I think we will understand what has happened to Kabbalah when it became Neo-Kabbalah. So first, Ashlag. According to Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag, and this is a 20th century Kabbalist, yes? So it's nothing ancient, but still he defines Kabbalah in a different way than his Neo-Kabbalistic descendants. He says, Kabbalah, no more or less, is an order, this is the 30s, is an order of root causes descending by way of antecedents and consequences according to regular and absolute laws, which conjoin and target one very high goal that is named, revealing his godliness to his created beings in the world. Another definition, again from the 30s, the wisdom of Kabbalah in general is the matter of divine disclosure set in order by his ways and in all his aspects, from what is revealed in the worlds and what will be revealed in the future, and in every way that is possible ever to be revealed in the worlds until the end of time. What is Kabbalah then, according to Ashlag? Kabbalah is a body of knowledge. It is a body of knowledge that describes the way the divine descends into the world, what is divine revelation, what the world needs to do in order to receive divine revelation, but it is a body of knowledge. It is a wisdom. It is a lore. Okay, that's Kabbalah. Now let's see how contemporary Kabbalists Neo-Kabbalists define Kabbalah. First, I want to introduce Berg's definition, or the Berg's, because Berg has already, or his sons have already taken his place and are writing about Kabbalah. What is Kabbalah according to the Kabbalah Center, again located in Los Angeles? Well, so Philip Berg, our founder of the Kabbalah Center, says, Kabbalah is a system that can deal intelligently with all problems thrown up by existence in the 20th century. Yehuda Berg, his son, says, Kabbalah encourages us to expand who we are in order to achieve a lasting flow of fulfillment, not the fleeting variety that lets us down again and again. And again, Yehuda Berg, Kabbalah is about action. It's not some cryptic philosophy. With this in mind, we ask you to be practical. Kabbalah tools, which we call K-tools, will help you reveal new insights that will lead to profound changes in your perspective, awareness, and actions. So Kabbalah is not a cryptic philosophy. It's really not a body of wisdom. Kabbalah is a method. It's a system. It's a practice. It's practical. It has tools. You take these tools and you improve your life. That's basically Kabbalah. It's not about how the divine reveals itself in reality, in history, in the world. It's about how you transform your life. Let's see what Rabbi Lightman says about Kabbalah. How does Rabbi Lightman define Kabbalah? So for Rabbi Lightman, Kabbalah, the wisdom of Kabbalah is a method that teaches man how to live in the reality laid before him. Kabbalah is a new and scientific world worldview that develops tools within us that welcome us into comprehensive reality and provide means to research it. Kabbalah is a method that teaches how to get the feeling out of the spiritual world, a method for changing one's faith, a method by which man and humanity reach perfect and eternal life, the only way to draw heavenly light and be happy. It's a method for transforming your own life and becoming happy. So what is Neo-Kabbalah? It is the deliberate and conscious attempt to draw inspiration, tools, and cultural capital from Kabbalistic lore in order to bring about Jewish contemporary spiritual revival. But when you draw that lore from Kabbalistic sources into contemporary spiritual revival, you internalize it, you personalize it, and you instrumentalize it. As with Neo-Hasidism, so with Neo-Kabbalah, ancient lore becomes privatized method or privatized transformative skill path. Now this is not of course by accident. This basically is the main trajectory, the main dynamics of modernity. Modernity in itself is an individualizing process, is a path by which people understand themselves more and more as individuals and are interested more and more in their internal life. Indeed, in the book The Jew Within, written by Stephen Cohen and Arnold Eisen in the year 2000, they sum up their findings saying, American Jews at the century's end, we believe, have come to view their Jewishness in a very different way than either their parents or they themselves did only 2 or 3 decades ago. Jews today, like their peers in other religious traditions, have turned inward in search of meaning. The principal authority for contemporary American Jews, in the absence of compelling religious norms and communal loyalties, has become the sovereign self. This has, this is of course relevant for Judaism, but it is a much broader process, really. And I would say it's a lot more comprehensive than the last few decades. Really, what they are talking about is what the philosopher Charles Taylor would call the great subjective turn of Western culture. Charles Taylor, the Canadian philosopher, right? This is part of the massive subjective turn of modern culture, a new form of inwardness in which we come to think of ourselves as being with inner depth. This is what has happened to us over the last 200-300 years. We have discovered or manufactured inner sources of meaning, of authority, and of identity. And as such, our understanding of religion has changed, and our demands, our needs from religion have changed. For people interested today in Kabbalah and Hasidism, what they need from these sources is not a great body of wisdom telling them how the divine reveals itself in graduate levels all over reality. What they need is not, as with Rabbi Nachman's Itbodedut, some sort of aching, yearning towards the divine that is not fulfilled unless you come an inch of death. What they need is something transformative, not too difficult, that will promise them a better life and an inner transformative process. This is the result of the subjective turn, which makes the Jews, as we said before, concentrate on the Jew within. Now, this doesn't come without a price. I want to quote Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, a very famous rabbi in Israel, though his origin is, he was born American, he died in 2015, not long ago. And Aaron Lichtenstein says, the spiritual, in today's culture, is often contrasted with the material, the formal, and the intellectual, all three being viewed as relatively external and compared to, in Hamlet's phrase, that within which paths show. Yet all three figure prominently within the halachic order. So what happens when we concentrate on our inner worlds? What happens when we take Hasidism and Kabbalah and turn them into inner, subjective, transformative systems, methods? What happens is we challenge the halachic structure of traditional Judaism. If what interests us is internal, why do we need all these bodies of law that are considered as Lichtenstein says, intellectual, formal, and material. What does it matter what we eat or when we rest, when what is important is our inner transformation? So the subjective turn is a great challenge for halachic Judaism, and it's not by accident that Neo-Kabbalah and Neo-Hasidism look the way they do, emphasizing the inner and rejecting the outer. And to return to our beginning, when we talk about Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shlomi's definition or observation about Neo-Hasidism, when we talk about authenticity, again I remind you the two different and maybe even contradictory ways of understanding authenticity. We can be authentic by tying ourselves to an ancient, original tradition, but we also can be authentic by expressing our innermost true self. And what is happening with Kabbalah turning into Neo-Kabbalah and Hasidism turning into Neo-Hasidism is that these two types of authenticity trade places, or the old type of authenticity, tying ourselves to an ancient tradition, really loses its place for the new type of authenticity expressing our innermost self. Thank you very much. And, I think we will now, right.
Thank you very much. So Tomer has agreed to take questions. He'll take them himself. He doesn't need me navigating that. So please.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I'm concerned with the deeply racist nature of Hasidism. When it considers, for example, in Tanya itself, that while the Jewish soul has a divine origin, the soul of every other human being comes from the beasts.
Right.
And there are hundreds of such.
Yeah, the Tanya though is especially.
Exactly. But it's a grounding, it's the Bible of the Hassidim. Are you concerned, and do you think that it is wise to preserve that dimension for the renewal of Jewish identity?
Okay. Thank you for that question. Am I concerned? Personally, yes. Personally, racism concerns me. And indeed, the Tanya specifically and a few other Hasidic texts are extremely racist, metaphysically racist, indeed talking about different kinds of souls, etc. I will say two things about this. One, in the Jewish renewal circles, taking from Hasidism, this doesn't show up at all. I mean, this is negated. This is basically denied, and not erased from history, but it is said that this is wrong. And indeed, Neo-Hasidism and Neo-Kabbalah, and these views are also Kabbalistic views, are open to Jews as well as non-Jews. So there's no distinction when a person wants to come and learn Neo-Hasidic techniques or Neo-Kabbalistic wisdom. So in renewal circles, that does not show at all. It does show, though, in certain types of Neo-Hasidism today practiced, unfortunately, I would say, in fringes of the religious Zionist public in Israel, mainly in Judea and Samaria, in the occupied territories. And there, what is interesting, following what I said here, is that the same authenticity that Jewish renewal circles looks for in Hasidism and Kabbalah by tapping into this wisdom and transforming inner processes, etc., the same type of authenticity is sought after, but this time by encouraging hatred and sometimes even violence towards non-Jews in Israel. And I think this shows us that this turn inside can on one hand, negate racism and say, well, inside everybody is the same and we don't need this sort of distinctions. Actually, they are wrong. And on the other hand, actually empower these distinctions and translate them to violence, and in a sort of romantic, sort of violent orgy, I would say, which we know from non- or anti-liberal movements from the 20th century. It's basically the same dynamic, right? So indeed, so is it troubling? Yes, and it can go both ways. Yes, please.
So my niece became very religious, and she lives in Los Angeles. She's not in this group. When we were visiting with her, and she talked about the Hasidish people.
Hasidish?
And I was wondering, have you heard that term, and do you know what it refers to?
No, I'm sorry. Hasidish? Like, I mean, it can. I think it can mean a lot of things, but I don't know what she meant specifically.
You haven't heard that term used?
No, I'm sorry.
I was wondering whether it was another name for the Neo-Hasidism.
I mean, I would guess it is, but I don't know. I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Thanks for a great lecture, Diller. I guess I'm wondering, you formulated these movements as challenge to halachic Judaism. I guess I'm wondering about that formulation in the following sense. These are movements that the vast majority of people that are attracted to them come from nothing. That is, they come either from being entirely secular or from not even being Jewish. So I wonder if the biggest challenge within these movements is not the content, which I agree with you is clearly it's a break, and it's basically a decontextualization of many of these ideas from the framework of halakha. That's how I would think of it. But I wonder if the biggest challenge is not that, because the fact that people didn't go from a halachic world to this, except for if you want to look at some grand historical arc, but then the use of the name, that is, to call something Neo-Hasidic, to call something Neo-Kabbalistic that has been divorced entirely from those contexts. It seems to me that that is maybe the greatest challenge, because it is to implicitly argue you can have all the benefits without the sort of tradition around it.
Yes. So I mean, I'll say two things. First of all, I mean, what challenges halakha is basically the great subjective term, basically modernity, basically our understanding of ourselves as beings with inner depth that are more important than our outer action and even the shape of our body. What is important is what's inside. That challenges halakha directly, because halakha thinks that what is important is the body, is the action, etc. But specifically for Neo-Hasidism, what you said is true. That's what Buber tried to do. Martin Buber tried to legitimize Jewish existence divorced from halakha through Hasidism, saying, well, actually, what these Hasidic masters told us is that what is important is our inner worlds and not. So Buber did exactly that, and on purpose, right? But I'll say another thing. It's not only, so, I mean, you said, yeah, but mostly these people weren't observing halakha from the to begin with. Like, what's the big? But it is challenging also to people who are observing halakha. I mean, when we take the Breslav Hasidic community today, people there, like the students of Rabbi Erez Moshe Doron, let's say, are Orthodox Jews. They are BT Jews. They have come back to the fold, but they are Orthodox. And when Erez Moshe Doron gives them this hitbodedut practice that really emphasizes their inner worlds, their inner emotions, the inner light, what does it mean for their halachic observance? And I want to read another quote that I've brought for just this eventuality. Look what Erez Moshe Doron writes in the same book that I read from before. Many movements of the heart frequent a person in hitbodedut prayer, and all influence him deeply, as prayer is an intense experience and an important part of his life of the believer. This supreme virtue of Itbodedut carries great danger if a person is quick to draw conclusions from every feeling which passes through his heart. Anyway, he must be careful not to give any importance to feelings and thoughts that are against the words of the Holy Torah and the advice of the true righteous man, of course. Erez Moshe Doron understands there's a danger here. He's a rabbi. He wants his people to continue observing the halakha. So he has to give this caveat, right? He has to give this disclaimer. Watch out, right? Be careful. Yes, develop the heart, strive for that inner light, but on the condition that it doesn't negate halakha. Don't think the light is more important than halakha, while at the same time saying all through the book, the light is the most important thing, right? So, I mean, there's a contradiction and there's a tension here that cannot be easily solved, and obviously, I mean, I would almost guarantee that for some Hasidic Jews, discovering the light and indeed understanding from everything in our culture today that it is the most important thing, they will forego, some of them at least, will forego the halachic observance because I've already discovered the light. What's the use, right? I mean, I have a good relationship with the divine. Thank you, that's it, right? So that's a constant challenge. Yes, please.
Does Neo-Hasidism talk about the soul? That one is, I mean, if part of Hitbodedut, for example, is trying to escape somehow the confines of myself and my soul, I'm wondering how Neo-Hasidism talks about what language is used in discussing soul.
Well, I mean, they would use the basic Kabbalistic language. There are 5 different parts of the soul. They would use these words, but as we have seen here, the direction, at least in Itbodedut, is different, right? Rabbi Nachman talked about abdicating the soul, negating, annihilating the soul. They talk about looking inwards and having a beam of light flow on the soul or from the soul or wherever. So the direction is...
I guess I'm trying to understand because my wife Shosh and I were recently at a lecture, or I don't know what to call it. I think the speaker called it a meditation by I don't know his title, it's sort of the eminence of Buddhism in the country of Bhutan. And he's been reincarnated.
The teacher?
I'm sorry?
The teacher has been reincarnated?
No, this Lama is a reincarnated soul.
Okay.
And so much of the language is awfully close to 70 or 80 of his 90 or 100 minutes of talking about how to practice what he might say, I call that Hitbodedut.
I mean, I would say this is because both Neo-Hasidism, as we talked of here, and I don't know what the system was, but any Buddhism that today is propagated or taught in the West is already, it has already gone through the Western contemporary spirit.
This is in Bhutan. I don't know that
It was in Bhutan?
Yes. A few weeks ago.
Okay, so I don't know exactly the situation and the people, etc.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say is that these things many times seem to say the same things because they are part of the same contemporary spirituality milieu or scene. I don't know what that specific teacher from Bhutan was, but I would guess that I mean, did he talk English?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so he probably is. Okay, so he probably is. Maybe I certainly don't know, but maybe he's also part of the same milieu that understands, that structures its spirituality in a very similar way.
In his current life, he's 26 years old, and he's recognized by all the older men and everything as being this original Lama reincarnated from the time he was 8 or 9.
Yeah, I mean, but even the Dalai Lama today will talk certainly to Westerners in a way that Westerners understand spirituality, which is this way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Sam.
Thank you so much for this really interesting talk. I'm interested in portraying Hassidim, like people who are sociologically situated in Hasidic communities as Neo-Hasidic, in the way that you spoke about the Piasetzner as Neo-Hasidic, or even Zalman and Shlomo in the 40s from within Chabad as Neo-Hasidic. And I personally generally think of Neo-Hasidism as like specifically non-Hasidim who are drawing upon Hasidism for the spirituality in a separate sociological sphere. And I'm just interested to kind of see like where the boundaries are. In as much as Hasidism has always been changing and reinterpreting itself, like often with reference to the early foundational figures of Hasidism for contemporary times, whether that's in the 19th century, the 20th century, within the Hasidic world, kind of where we draw the line if we're opening up Neo-Hasidism to include people in the Hasidic world. And I'll just share like a little tidbit that Ron McCohen in Tel Aviv published this really interesting paper where he showed that Buber's Hasidic tales have actually been sort of covertly plagiarized within recent Hasidic publications and have completely flown under the radar. So in a sense, like the changes Buber was making, we know that he's outside of the Hasidic world, so we can say, oh, he's doing this, he's doing that, but they're not actually necessarily more kind of striking than the changes that would just normally be happening within Hasidic.
I don't know normally.
Well, his later Hasidic tales, but I'll stop.
No, but the question is about what role plays Neo-Hasidism in Hasidic circles?
Right, and like where do you draw the line? Because if Neo-Hasidism is defined as anyone, whether they're...
No, because, I mean, look, that's why I brought the Piasetzner. The Piasetzner, I mean, he's the first Neo-Hasidic, I would say, teacher inside Hasidism. And he says we need to go back to real Hasidism. What does that mean? That means he's dissatisfied with his own Hasidism, and Hasidism he finds around him in the 20s in Poland, and he thinks there is something else, better, original, etc. there, and he wants to go back there and bring it for a religious awakening in the present. And that's Neo-Hasidism. For him, it is in order to strengthen Orthodox observance. For Buber, of course, something completely different. That's what I would say, and it happens, right? It will still happen today in Hasidic circles, that Hasidic masters, not necessarily big rabbis, but will say, look, Hasidism today has gone decrepit, I don't know, it's dry, it's mechanical, and we need to go back to the original. Of course, any revolutionary goes back to the original in order to do something completely different, and that's what they will do.
Yes, please.
Do the Neo-Kabbalists draw on the early Hasidic texts? I'm just wondering because it strikes me that the early Hasidic thought themselves to be Neo-Kabbalists.
Yeah, that's, I mean, fantastic observation. Of course, early Hasidic texts, in a way, are neo-Kabbalistic because they internalize Kabbalah and personalize Kabbalah. But no, they don't do that. I mean, at least as far as I know, they don't go to Hasidic text, and they do that they do their own personalization and internalization of Kabbalah without Hasidic legitimization or texts or authority, simply on their own authority, or for Berg and Lightman, it would be on Reb Ashlag's authority. They would say, he actually said all that we are saying today. I mean, they want to keep it Kabbalistic. That's the thing. They don't want to say the Hasidic master said, because they don't want to go there. Yes, please.
Talk a bit about gender, about women in this context, because it might be a lot of the texts you were quoting were always in the masters.
Right, right. That's a great question. So, of course, in Orthodox circles, women have less of a place. And if we're talking about Neo-Hasidism in the Jewish renewal circles, women are a completely equal part. I don't know if leading equal time or congregations or number of congregations, but are totally acceptable. And in Neo-Kabbalah, it's interesting. For the Kabbalah Center in Los Angeles, women are completely apart and leading. I mean, Berg's wife is one of the leaders there, and there's a whole real like feminist scene in which the divine itself is considered female, and there's, I mean, they're invested in that quite a lot. While for Rabbi Lightman, and the Bnei Baruch Center in Israel, it's completely different. Women are really set apart. They're not a part of the Kabbalistic teachings and learning process. It's all men. Women have their part, but it's the subjugated, relegated, usual, traditional patriarchal part given to women, which is, preparing the food and supporting the husband in his Kabbalistic learning. Right, and we can theorize why the difference is there, but it's a significant difference.
So maybe we have time for one last question.
Yes. This is also something of a request, which is to speak a little bit more to something like inner movement and inward action. And you say that halakha obviously privileges or tends to take some interest in the body and action and movement. But what about considering the radical proximity of the inward to the outward, of the almost erotic simultaneity of the different motions, of the sense in which the inner manifests itself outwardly, and what about movement that doesn't give itself to productivity in the way that you define Neo-Kabbalah, for instance?
To productivity?
Yes, as a praxis, as a movement forward, an inner movement that is almost akin to the kind of rhythm that you mentioned, the longing, the yearning, the aching, the abnegation, which never approaches nullity. I think that there's also a difference between abnegation and nullification. There's a way to yearn without nullifying. There's a way to preserve the subject and give in a way that is other-oriented.
Yes, I mean.
The gist of the question, it was very hard to hear.
Really, correct me if I'm wrong, the question is about the relationship between inner movements and outer body and outer law and outer practice. And the last thing you said was straight into Rabbi Nachman's thought, right? The inner nullification that does not lead to knowledge, but just to a continuation of the passion, simply now with some contact or unification with the divine. But really that stays with Rabbi Nachman. You don't see it, you hardly see it today in Neo-Hasidic and Neo-Kabbalistic circles. And what is important, I think, to understand if we are talking about the relationship between inner and outer, is really, first of all, the question, what takes precedence? The transformation from Hasidism to Neo-Hasidism and from Kabbalah to Neo-Kabbalah is a transformation from authority and meaning found outside of the self, right, in the divine, basically, or in the way to the divine, and authority and meaning found inside. I mean, what Neo-Kabbalists and Neo-Hasidic teachers and really the whole contemporary spirituality milieu will emphasize is that you can find everything within yourself. You don't need to go out of yourself. You don't need neither an external divine nor an external meeting with somebody else, an external other for yourself. I would say that's the gist of the difference there. Does this in any way?
I just think that bifurcation is abusive to the the simultaneity, I don't think it's possible to extricate, I guess I was asking.
No, that may be
the
so.
phenomenology of inwardness, of the kind of inwardness you speak, and how that inwardness exposes itself almost rhythmically to, and bleeds out in a way that.
I totally agree, but I was not talking about what actually is possible, of course, when you are on the, when a person is on the spiritual path, but what these people understand and hope for from their spiritual path. Whether it is actually realistic or not is something else.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.